So Gesneraceae is a family of a whole lot of different fuzzy leafed flowering plants. So aside from the African violets, you are going to see Streptocarpus, which is this one with these really beautiful upright blooms. Comes in a lot of different colors as well, not as many varieties as African violets, but Streptocarpus. And then even Streptocarpella, which still has a fuzzy, it's a smaller, rounder leaf with these flowers. This is your standard Streptocarpella, which is Concord blue, kind of a purple flower. This is a special one that we just saw this year coming in from a local grower that we have here. It's called Dancing Doves. So just to let you know, these are all in the same family. So they're all going to require the same care. So I'm going to be talking about violets, but the other one I forgot is Primulina. These are adorable. They're really small ones. You can see I have this one in this small self-watering pot. This is from my house. So all of these are in the greenhouse right now. It's a great time to come in and see them. If you don't want to try an African violet, I would suggest the Primulina. They're smaller, and in my opinion, they're actually easier to get to flower. So these guys were all in the same exact family. Let's talk about African violets. Everyone knows that when I talk about plants, I like to talk about the native growing conditions, where they grow in nature. Because if you know where they grow in nature, where they're happy, then you can replicate that exact environment in your house. And that's a really good tip. Do a little research on the plant that you buy. So African violets, who knows what country they're from? I heard someone say Africa. Yeah, you're right. So they come from Africa, specifically the eastern coastal area, Kenya. That over there, they grow in what they call fog forests or cloud forests, which we commonly call rainforests. So they're on the coast. There's a lot of cloud cover. So that cloud cover is going to filter any direct sunlight. They will never get touched by direct sunlight. They're down on the floor of those fog forests, and that soil is going to stay very, very moist. It's going to be very, very rich in nutrients, which is going to help them flower. Very often you'll find them, they'll just be tucked away in between little rocks and crevices, and sometimes they actually will be growing behind waterfalls. Why is that important? When they're in those little areas tucked away under larger vegetation, behind waterfalls, in crevices, they're not getting rained on directly. The soil stays consistently moist, yet the flowers don't get rained on. So remember that when we talk about watering. Very rich soil, we'll talk about that for potting, and the light, you want it filtered. You don't want any direct sun. So we'll talk about that when we get to placement. So that's a little background of where they're from. Let's talk about what you're going to look for when you go to buy one. Your most valuable tool is going to be your eyes, because you want to pick one out that looks good. You don't want to go somewhere and see one on sale and say, I feel really sorry for it. I'm going to try to revive it. Because with African violets, there's certain problems like root rot, crown rot that we'll get to. You're not going to save it. So you want to pick one that looks really nice. What features will you look for? You want to look for leaves that are dark green. Now, this one, I don't know if you can see it, but it actually has variegated leaves. That's normal. So you have to know for this specific type what it's supposed to look for, and you can always Google that on your phone. If I was buying this one, I would just look up Harmony's Hot Flash, that's the name, and it will show you what a perfect one should look like. But in general, you're looking for nice dark leaves. You don't want any spots. Brown spots can be a watering issue. We'll talk about that later. You want it to look almost like a dinner plate. You want the lower leaves to lay flush against the pot. You don't want to see a long neck that looks like a palm tree with the foliage on the top. Okay, so you want to see a nice flat kind of dinner plate growth. You also want to see all the leaves growing up from one central point. That's called the crown of the plant. Now, they do put out babies. They do put up pups. In general, you really want to buy one that's just one crown. If you have a pup in there, that pup is going to be taking energy from the mom, and that energy could be better spent on blooming. So to get the best bloomer, you want one central growing area, one crown. The other thing you want to look for, as you can see in this, we have some beautiful flowers here. They're not dry or crispy. We also have these buds. It's normal for them to come up and be hanging down like that. You do not want these buds to be crispy. You don't want to see the flower buds laying in the soil. That's inconsistent watering, bud blasts, they'll just fall right off. So you want it to look really nice and healthy when you select it and bring it home. So the next thing is you've decided which one you want. You're bringing it home. Merrifield wraps it all up because it's cold here. You always want to protect it. They are very cold sensitive. Bring it home, and where are you going to put it in your house? Remember the light. So they want nice, bright, but filtered light. So a north or an east window would be perfect. An east window is where I have one of mine. I have my little Primulina and a north window. An east window is going to get some direct morning sun, but that sun is going to be less harsh than afternoon sun. So north or east window. You also want to make sure, especially during the winter, that there are no cool drafts. They're very cold sensitive. So I tell people they like the temperature that we like. We tend to like temperatures, normal temperatures in our household in the 70s. Anything getting up above 80, anything getting down below in the 60s, they like it, to be how we like it. So if you put it near a window, make sure that window is free of drafts. Make sure that the leaves are not going to be touching that cold glass in the winter. You can actually get a cold burn. So you found the right spot for your plant. Let's say you put it in your east window. The one thing you want to remember to do before I forget to tell you is they will grow towards the light. And you want to make sure that you give it like a quarter turn every time you water it, or maybe once a week. Just turn it, because you don't want to have one that is stretching out. It's going to get a long neck. We'll talk about that. So just remember, whatever spot you put it in, make sure you can give it a little quarter turn. That's a good tip. Let's talk about watering. So African violets is one of the only plants that I will tell people it is okay to go ahead and water it from the bottom. I water mine from the top, but if you want to bottom water it, that's fine, because it replicates that moist soil and them not getting rained on in nature. You can bottom water in a tray, or a lot of people choose a self-watering pot, and these are awesome. Also called African violet pots. What you do, this is not planted in here, but this is the container. You can buy them here. This is glazed. It's not glazed here, it's porous. You're going to soak this part. This is the most important. Soak this in water overnight. That's going to start the non-glazed part wicking. You plant your African violet in this pot, and then you're going to fill this pot, the reservoir, up about 2/3 with water and set this in. So it will just take in the water as it needs it, as long as you remember once a week, check the water level and always keep it filled. So this is a really easy way, and this is how I have my Primulina at home. I took the water out because I was driving here today, but just set it and forget it. That's what I say. The other thing is, if you are not going to use a self-watering pot, you want to be careful. Never pour water in the crown. You want to water just the soil all the way around till it drains out the bottom. Never mist, never put water. You can get spots on the leaves from water, especially with chlorination sitting on their brown spots. So you want to avoid that. Let's talk about fertilizing. You always want to fertilize your African violets because of that rich, nutrient-rich soil that they're used to. You're going to want to fertilize to get consistent blooming. So you want to pick up a good African violet fertilizer. Two that I like are the Schultz and the Jack's. We sell both of them. These are concentrated. This is a liquid. This is a granular. This you make up by a gallon. This you make up by a quart. You can come in and we can talk to you about the differences between these two. If you have just a few African violets, you may want to use the liquid because you can make a quart at a time. After you're done watering your plant, you always water first. You don't want to apply fertilizer to dry roots, could cause burn. When you're done watering, you apply the fertilizer. And you're going to want to do that either at a reduced amount every time you water or every other watering. And that is all contained on the package back, on the label, and we can help you with that when you come in. So you're having the right light, you are not having them in the cold, you are consistently fertilizing. And then the other thing that we need to really quick talk about is potting and repotting. I think aside from the light issue when fertilizing, my customers seem to have a real issue with 3 areas in potting. It's either not using the right soil, using a pot that's too big, and not potting frequently enough. So very quickly, you always want to make sure that you use, here it is, an African violet soil. An African violet soil has a lot of peat in it. It's very light, it's very airy. It's going to allow their very fine roots to push through. It's not going to get muddy. You don't want to use topsoil. You don't want to use regular potting soil. You definitely want to invest in the African violet soil. The other thing is that these guys, remember, they grow in the crevices of rocks. They want to have small pots. The pot size that's recommended is the exact size of the root ball. Okay, so you don't want to put them in big pots. And then the third thing is you're going to want to repot these way more frequently than we advise you repotting any other greenhouse plant. Twice a year is recommended. Does it go into a bigger pot? No. What's going to happen over time? Remember those necks I talked about? People bring things in with these long necks and we have to behead them. It's very stressful on the plant. You don't want to allow your plant to get a long neck. So what you're going to do is every 6 months, as the plant loses these lower leaves and starts developing the neck, you're just going to take it out of the pot. If the neck is about 1/2 inch, with clean knife or scissors, you are just going to cut off 1/2 inch of the bottom of that root ball. Perfectly fine. Put more soil in, pot it down. It brings that level of the plant down, no more neck. So if you put in your mind that you're going to repot twice a year, but stay in the same size pot, just trim those roots down, you will never have a long neck. And that's one of the things a lot of people neglect. So make sure you have a nice small pot size, use the right soil, you repot appropriately, you have the right light, fertilize, water correctly. I know it sounds like a lot, but they're actually really easy if you just follow everything that I just outlined. So that being said, I guess I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. Oh, one thing I didn't get to propagation. They're easy to propagate. The best way is by leaf. So you want to pick a healthy plant. Don't wait until your plant's dying and then say, I want to propagate it. The leaves you want to use, you don't want to use the older leaves. Older leaves don't propagate as well. You also don't want to cut off the new baby leaves. So pick a nice leaf from the middle layer. You are going to cut the whole leaf off or pinch it off like I'm doing. This is the leaf stalk, okay? Once you've done that, you are going to cut just half an inch, leave 1/2 inch. You're going to get 2/3 perlite and 1/3 African violet soil. Pre-moisten that, put it in a little pot like I've done here. And you're going to add some rooting hormone, which is a powder that we sell here. I have it somewhere here. I'll find it later. We'll talk about it next. Here we go for other plants. Put a little bit of rooting hormone on the end of it. You can chop the top off so it can fit in a takeout container. Keep it moist. This is going to help with humidity, and you will eventually see little plantlets grow. Some people do like to propagate them in water. That's also a method. I find it can kind of cause a little stem rot. So I like the soil method. It takes a little longer, but it's very rewarding. So I guess that's it. Sally, do we have any questions yet?
Yeah, we do have some questions, and I just want to make sure everybody knows we've got a lot of questions coming in. So Gretchen, I don't think we'll probably be able to get to all of them.
And I do have 2 other plants to talk about, so
You
I'll answer a
we're
couple.
ready to move on. And guys, if we can't get to your question today, please feel free to send me an email. I can pass it along to Gretchen, or you can always call the store because Gretchen's at Fair Oaks. So
And actually, one other thing I did want to put, this is the one plant that I'm talking about today that is cat safe and dog safe. So that if that's a concern, it's a beautiful flowering plant that's easy, that's also safe for your pets.
yeah, that's definitely good. All right, so our first question about African violets is, how can I get rid of white fuzzy fungus on African violets?
Ah, okay. So I didn't get to the pest part. I could talk for an hour on this. Common pests, there are cyclamen mites, they're like spider mites, mealy bugs. It sounds like powdery. Did they say on the soil or did they say on the leaves of the plant?
Let's see here. Sorry, it filters to a different area once I say that we're answering.
So I'll address both. There could be
It
kind
just
of like,
says on the violets. So
okay, so that sounds like powdery mildew. Powdery mildew looks kind of like talcum powder, just dusty white kind of stuff that gets on the leaves. If you have powdery mildew, there are spores, you need to take care of that. You can come in to Merrifield, we can recommend a product, but there is a home remedy you may want to try. I don't know it off of the top of my head. It is, can we list that somewhere, Sally? It is baking soda and water. You make up, I think it's like 2 tablespoons and water, and you spray it on the leaf. That's a home remedy that you can use, and we will get that out to you. Or you could come in and ask for a product for powdery mildew for African violets. And there are products that we sell. Those are sold in the plant clinic.
yeah, that's great. And I've not heard that before. So we can definitely get that out to everybody after the class.
The other thing is, I said we always have these available, but remember, they don't like the heat. So when it's so hot and humid here, we don't have a lot of them. And that's on purpose in July and August because they hate the hot. If you've been in our greenhouse, it's so hot and sweaty. They tend to get powdery mildew. So one thing that you can do, if your house, my parents don't run their air conditioning a lot, their house is really humid. Get a little oscillating fan or make sure you're getting some good air circulation. Don't crowd all your plants together, and that'll help prevent them. Never miss the leaves, never get them wet. All those things can cause the powdery mildew. But you can bring your plant in, wrap it up really well, bring it to the plant clinic, and we can let you know where to take it depending on how severe it is.
Thanks, Gretchen. All right, next question is for people who are using self-watering pots. We've had a couple questions come in about how to ensure that you're making it dry out slightly so that you're not watering too much. Like what does that mean?
So the self-watering pots, the one thing you'll notice when you have one in a self-watering pot, you always want to keep water in the reservoir. When you take it out, this part will be really wet. The top of the soil will feel dry. That's because it's pulling from the bottom. So you don't have to worry. As long as you keep water in this is going to do the job for you. You're not going to have to touch the soil with your finger to make sure. You're just always going to keep water in there. The one thing that I do want to let you know is that you are going to be fertilizing. When you fertilize in a self-watering pot, a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to add the fertilizer to the water reservoir. The molecules of the fertilizer, here's more science, will not pass through this pot. So that's going to be a waste of product. So what you're going to have to do is apply your fertilizer, mix it up. Again, the top of your soil is going to be a little dry. You can just apply a little bit of water. It'll drain out here. Don't worry about it. And then you want to apply your fertilizer always to the soil, never to the water reservoir. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think that's good. Do you have to deadhead African violets?
Yes. So when they're done blooming, I don't see any here. That's a good question. You do want to go ahead. They'll just dry up. A lot of times the bloom will dry up and fall off. At that point, what you want to do there, so there can be many, many different blooms on one little stem. When all the blooms on that one stem are gone, I just pinch that back, pinch it all the way back down. There's no use for the plant to send energy out to something that has no more flowers on it. So you're going to want to basically deadhead, pinch that back. For these guys, which are the Streptocarpella, again, they have these little wiry stems with a lot of blooms. When they're all done blooming, you just follow that down, pinch that off. That's going to allow the plant to put energy somewhere else instead of sending it up to a dead flower stalk.
That's great. Thank you. All right. We have a ton of more questions coming in. Do you want to keep going or do you want to?
I still have to get to the other two plants.
Okay,
so
sounds good. Why don't we move on to the next two plants? And then if we have time, we'll come back to those at the end.
Yeah, we bit off a lot. We bit off a lot here today. But and you can probably tell I could easily talk about African violets for another hour, just answering questions. But any questions that you have, we will answer by email. So, but I do need to get on to my next plant, which is actually two plants in one. So if you can get out your care sheet that hopefully you printed out for Pothos and Philodendron, we're going to talk about those now. So Pothos is going to be this plant here. This is a jade pothos. It's all green. A lot of people call this philodendron. Actually, in the 70s, everyone called this philodendron. It's pothos. And then we are also going to be talking about certain types of philodendron. This is an all green heartleaf philodendron. So to simplify things, there are 10 different types of pothos available. 5 of them are ones that Merrifield carries. Philodendron, I think there's like 480, closing in on 500 types. So we're just going to be talking about the trailing philodendron that are kind of your basic starter philodendron that we sell all the time. Like my favorite in the world, the heartleaf philodendron. We're not going to be talking about these big, climbing philodendron, pink princess and Birkin and all these fancy plants. Just talking about the trailing philodendron today, because as I said, there's almost 500 type of philodendron. So Pothos and Philodendron are a lot of times lumped together. Again, they're in the same exact family. They are in the Araceae family, more Latin, which is aroids or arums, you probably heard. So they are like cousins, different plants, same family, same type of growing condition. Where do pothos come from? Southeast Asia. Humid, hot, tropical, on the bottom level, not getting direct sun. Philodendron, on the other hand, come a little bit closer. They're from the Central and Southern Americas, Central and South America, but same type of, on the bottom of the rainforest floor, forest floor, they're not up there getting direct light. It's filtered, very humid, lots of humidity, very important. So those are their native growing conditions. Similarities between the two of them, I already talked about their native growing conditions. They both want to grow in vines. So as you can see, this starts out little and then it starts with a vine, and they want to climb. They want to climb up other trees, other plants. Pothos can form a ground cover, but in the native habitat, they are going to be on the ground floor climbing up. Now, what we do is we love to put them, instead of climbing, we love to show them in hanging baskets. So they're happy to hang too. Little note, if you allow your philodendron or your pothos to climb, over time the leaves will get bigger. So my friend lives in Miami Beach, and she actually has golden pothos, which is this guy, living natively in her backyard. But the leaves are like this big. They're huge because they just crawl all over everything. So those are the similarities. Best varieties for your house. Okay. Everyone says, get a philodendron. They don't need light. Get a pothos. They don't need light. They are good for lower light situations. When you want to pick one out, well, let's get into the different varieties that we have. Pothos, 10 different varieties. 5 of them we have. Not all the time, but for the most part, we try to have the jade pothos, which is all green, the golden pothos, which has the gold marbling in it right here. This is what a lot of people call money plant. So you may hear it called devil's ivy is another common name for it. Third one is going to be neon pothos, which is this really cool neon color. Pearls and jade, which is this one here, which is little heart-shaped leaves with a lot of white and green blotchiness. And then the fifth one is going to be Marble Queen, which is one of my favorites. It's a highly variegated, but it's not going to be in patches. It just has a really pretty, almost white. And then for the kind of basic trailing philodendron, again, I said my favorite is this heartleaf one. And what other oh, so we have, where did it go? We're getting lost. Brazil. You see the beautiful variegation in that? And this is happy to climb or trail. So of those, if you're looking for an area in your house that has lower light, and when I say lower light, I don't mean no light. Pinterest says no light. Remember biology, plants cannot grow with no light. They either need some natural light or you're going to need to supplement with a grow light. There are grow lights that look like regular lights these days. They're not like the harsh, ones in people's basements when they used to grow all these African violets under lights. So there is no such thing as a no light plant. Low light, yes. What is low light? There has to be a window in the room for most plants. The nice thing about pothos and these philodendron, some of them, is they're the only plants, one of the only plants that I will say are okay to grow under purely fluorescent light, like you would have in an office. The key is that in an office, the lights are on all day long. People say, I have a powder room, there's a light bulb in there. It only gets used maybe when I have guests. That's not a low light situation. Okay, so let's get that clear. That being said, the best for a lower light situation is going to be your jade because it's all green. Anything with variegation, any white or yellow is going to need more light. Another favorite for a really low light area, I keep coming back to this one, is the heartleaf. Okay, so these are the two that I'm going to put in people's houses when they say I have low light. Also the golden. The golden, it does have patches of yellow, but it's pretty hardy. So those are your lower light. Even the neon actually looks like it would need a lot more light, but it's pretty happy in a fluorescent light area, lower. When you get into things like the pearls and jade or the marble queen, or even the Brazil, which is this philodendron I showed you with the yellow, okay, they're going to need a little bit more light. So think about that when you're placing them in your house. Again, an east window, somewhere that doesn't get any direct sun in the morning would be okay. So that's where you're going to want to place your philodendron or your pothos. Beware of imposters. There's a lot of plants, and I'm a little strapped for time, so I won't go into it, but there's like the satin pothos, the silvery Ann pothos. Those are actually not pothos. It's a third cousin. We've got pothos, we've got philodendron, and then we've got Scindapsus. So Scindapsus is a third cousin. We're not going to talk about it today, but when you hear silver satin pothos or silvery Ann pothos, exotica pothos, those are actually a third plant called Scindapsus. If you want more information on that, you can just Google the difference between pothos and Scindapsus. But if you come in and ask for a silver satin pothos, we'll show you a Scindapsus, just so you know. Someone always asks that. That's why I wanted to throw that out there. So we went over the best varieties for the lower light, the placement in the home. Let's talk about watering, because that's where, especially during the winter, a lot of people are going wrong. I'm going to do watering and potting in the same subject. You have to put your philodendron or pothos in a pot with a drainage hole. That I'm just not going to say more. You have to have a drainage hole or you're going to get root rot. When you water the plant, you are going to want to allow it to dry out somewhat before you give it a full watering. So what's a full watering? A full watering is when I decide it's time to dry out, bring it to the sink is the best thing. Water the soil until the water comes out the bottom of the pot. That's a full watering. That's how you're going to water your pothos and your philodendron. Now, people talk about over watering. I can pour water in here for the next half hour. I'm not going to over water it because it's just going through. Okay, what you can do is to frequently water. That means I'm going to pour a lot of water in here today, and then I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. Or I'm going to say I'm going to do it twice a week, whether it needs or not. That's too frequent watering, and they will get root rot, and they will turn yellow, and you'll want to know what's going on. So you want to touch the top of the soil with your finger. If it's dry to the touch, then you want to generally, for these guys, stick your finger down just to that first knuckle. If the soil's dry and pulling away from the edge of the pot, it's usually time to water, okay? So give it a full watering, but you need to allow them to dry out between waterings. And that's, I think, the biggest obstacle that people have with Pathos and Philodendron is they want to water on a calendar schedule. They want to water every Monday, whether it needs it or not. If your house is cooler in the winter, if you're not getting as much light, conversely, if during the summer you have trees outside that get leaves that are blocking the light, the soil's going to dry out slower or quicker depending on the time of year. That's why you always want to use your finger. Always let them experience dryness between waterings. The other thing that you want to do as far as watering is you do want to water these. You do want to fertilize these. You hear a lot about not fertilizing during the winter. Well, my house has tremendous light all year long. I'm getting lots and lots of new growth all year long. So I continue to fertilize through the winter. Some of my customers live in areas, homes that are a little bit darker. They don't get as much light. They don't keep their house as warm as I do. I like a nice warm house. So if your house is cooler and you're not getting as much light, you're not going to see growth. You may want to take a break from fertilizing during the winter. So many different fertilizers. I'm just going to tell you, you want to use one recommended for houseplants. Two of my favorite ones are going to be Foliage Pro by Dyna. It's a liquid. Also, again, the Schultz. I just realized this is not the African Violet Schultz that I showed before. This is the African Violet Schultz. Schultz also makes a liquid, and it's the same thing, 7 drops to a quart. So if you only want to make up a quart of fertilizer, Schultz is great. Dyna you make up by the gallon. And then we also have Jack's, which we use in the greenhouse. So come in, we'll tell you about the differences, but they're all great. If you're not into adding fertilizer every 2 weeks or a dilute every week, you may want to use, and I use this in addition to liquid fertilizer. This is a granular. A granular fertilizer is going to be a slow release. You put it in every 6 months, the top of the soil, and every time you water, your plants are getting 14 different nutrients. So this is kind of, I don't want to say the lazy way. I do this for all my plants every 6 months. And then the ones that are actively growing, I will use a liquid fertilizer regularly. Another point, this is great for every plant. The only plant I do not recommend Osmocote for is African violets. You do not want to use a fertilizer that's not water soluble. That this will not dissolve in water. So you have a lot of different options for your philodendron and your pothos as far as fertilizing. It is something I encourage people to do regularly. Always water first. Let's get to propagation real quick. These are the easiest things to propagate. All you need to do is to cut off a piece of this stem, and you want to make sure you have what's called a node. A node is the little, it's like a little mole, like little thing sticking out there. They can grow into aerial roots, and aerial roots are what they attach onto poles with. You can see this one is growing up a pole, and there are actually, I wish you could see, little roots that are clinging onto the pole. Really cute. So those little roots will grow out of those little nodes. You want to make sure you have one of those little nodes. If you're rooting in water, you stick that down in the water. If you're rooting directly in soil, you're going to want to use some rooting hormone Sprinkle some of that, make a little hole in the little pot of soil, and it will slowly grow roots. So they're very, very easy to propagate, extremely easy. As I said, my first plant was a pothos, and I propagated the heck out of that thing. And I gave it to everybody I knew. So, you know, I think we'll probably be having another propagation seminar. So if you want to look out for that. But they're probably the easiest to propagate of any of the plants I'm talking about today. Let's talk really, really quickly about problems that you may have. I talked about if your leaves are looking yellow and floppy and limp, you're keeping the soil too moist. Your roots are too moist. You need to take a break, a longer break between watering. That is root rot, and that's something that you can talk to our plant clinic about. If your leaves are coming in really small all of a sudden, it's not getting enough light. And that's a common thing that happens during the winter. As you see, this guy here, the leaves are actually getting bigger and bigger because it's getting good light and it's being allowed to climb up a pole. So you may want to give it something to climb up, increase the light. Pale color, just looking not real green, just kind of looking blah, but not limp. Probably not enough light. Could be the soil's too moist, or it could be a lack of nutrients. A lot of times, you know, we tell people to start fertilizing, it should green right up. Brown leaf tips, that's a big one. Brown leaf tips just basically means something is off with your watering. A lot of people right away will think, oh, brown, dry, I'm going to water more. But brown leaf tips can also be that it's staying too moist. So again, bring a leaf in, we can take a look at it. But you're going to avoid all these issues if you just use your finger, allow that soil to pull away from the top of the pot slightly, stick it down your index finger, allow them to dry out. It's much better for the plant to be a little bit not water frequently enough than to water too frequently, especially with the Pothos and Philodendron. If you start seeing little teeny yellow pinhead dots all over the leaves, or if you see webbing anywhere, that's spider mites, and you're going to need to come in to us, bring a leaf in a plastic bag to the plant clinic. We can tell you what to do about it. Spider mites, you want to address those. They can pass to all your plants. Mealy bugs, little cottony-like looking things, again, bring it to the plant clinic. We can tell you what to do about that. But those are just pretty much the common pests. And these are wonderful, wonderful plants. They're high on the air cleaning list. I'll get to that when I talk to snake plants. They're great. I think any home and any office has a place that you could safely put one of these plants. So I probably sell more of these than anything else that I sell. So with that, do we have any questions? Oh, and soil, African violets, remember they needed the African violet soil. Soil for these guys, make sure it's just a good soil that is recommended for house plants. You don't want to use your topsoil or all compost or anything you would use in your garden. Come in and we will recommend. With COVID, a lot of the different soils are not readily available. So we may be recommending one thing this week and something else, but anything that we have in here is going to be a quality indoor soil that I would recommend.
Thanks, Gretchen. Yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in, so just let me know when you need to move on to the next set of plants.
Okay.
The first question, a couple people asked if you could go back over the fertilizers that you recommended for the Pothos and Philodendron.
Mm-hmm. So you have, when I was little, we had one type. It was the Job's plant spikes, which they still make. That was it. It's great that there's so many products and there's so much technology today, but it's very overwhelming to the new plant collector or plant parent, people say these days. So if you're not fertilizing at all, a baby step thing to do is to get some Osmocote. Now, this is the pink Osmocote. This is good for house plants. It says indoor and outdoor. There's also one with a green cap that's better for like fruits and vegetables and things outside. You are going to use this. It's usually about a half a teaspoon every 6 months. Work that into the top of your soil. Then every time you water, you know that your plant is going to be getting fertilizer. So start with this. then it's perfectly safe to use a water-soluble fertilizer in addition to that. So I tell people, now you start building. If you feel comfortable with that, come in and I will recommend one of these three, which is going to be the Jack's Houseplant Special. It's a granular. You mix this up by the gallon. It's a blue granular. This is what we use in the greenhouse. Schultz, it comes in a smaller bottle. This is a liquid. And I love Schultz because all of their formulas are 7 drops to a quart of water. So you never have to, it's always the same, whether it's the African violet, the Schultz, orchid, everything is 7 drops to a quart of water. I'm sorry, a quart. So if you don't have a lot of plants and you don't want to make up a whole gallon and have that gallon, sitting underneath your sink, Schultz is the way to go. And then one of my favorites is Foliage Pro by Dyna Grow. I love this product. This I make up a 1/4 teaspoon to a gallon. It's very light and I use it every time I water. It has calcium in it, magnesium. It has a lot of other things that the other fertilizers don't have. Comes in a very small bottle, doesn't use a lot of plastic, doesn't take up a lot of room. But like I said, I switch around. I'll find one that I really like. And then if I don't have it, we use all 3 of these. Actually, we use these 2 in the greenhouse. So come in, we can pick out a good fertilizer for you. It really depends on, how many plants you have, how actively do you want to fertilize every time you water? Do you want to fertilize only every 6 months? Do you want to do both? So there's a lot of options, but all of the fertilizers that we have that we sell here at Merrifield are ones that I feel really comfortable using and recommending.
Thanks, Gretchen. All right. One more question we've had a few people ask is, when is the best time to repot?
It's always best to repot when your plant is actively growing. So I hear people say, don't repot in the winter, don't repot in the winter. I have an Instagram account and I put videos of myself repotting and people are like, you're repotting in the winter. Again, just like with fertilizing, you want the plant to be actively growing. The other thing is when you repot, it's stressful. You're literally uprooting the plant. And if you're doing it right, you're going to loosen those roots. Things can go wrong. So aside from even if you have the good light, sometimes it's really cold in your house and you put your plant back in that corner window and it's cold and it's just been repotted. So I like to tell people to try to wait until the spring, anywhere early spring throughout the summer, give it some nice fertilizer, it'll take off. But I have a lot of plants and I have to repot constantly. So I just make sure there are, like cacti and succulents, I don't repot in the winter. They're not growing a lot. If you have something like a pothos that's going crazy and growing everywhere, or a big spider plant, tons of babies, go ahead, you can repot it in the winter. But the best time is to wait until spring. We got a lot of people that are sitting at home, COVID, and they see their plants are like, this has to be repotted. Repotting is not always the answer. A lot of these plants, like African violets, they like small pots. Putting them in a bigger pot a lot of times is going to give you more problems because you're putting it in a pot that's way too big for its roots. There's all that extra soil in there. That soil is going to take forever to dry and you're going to get root rot. So small pot, think of small pot. Ferns, you could go bigger, but for the most part, you really want to, people bring things in to be repotted and we're like, no, we send them home. It's the wrong time of year. Your plant's not growing. You don't need repotting. You need a watering lesson. That's what's going on. So, consider if you want to repot, what are the reasons you're repotting? Because you think you should, because there's spots on the leaves. And then if you're not sure and it's spring or summer, you can bring your plant in and we'll let you know. Please don't bring your plant in the middle of the cold. It can cause a lot of problems.
Thanks,
and
Gretchen.
Sally, I have to talk about snake plants still.
Yeah,
And I have 10 minutes.
You can go ahead and move on to the next one. So everybody,
Okay.
just remember, you can email us with more questions.
Okay. So everyone that knows me knows that I hate common names, but people think that using the botanical scientific names is snobby. I used to think that. There's a reason for using them. Like I said, people commonly call so many different things pothos. Devil's ivy, what is that? What is money plant? So that's why I always like to talk about the scientific name of things. That's going to get us a little hung up in the snake plants, and I do need to kind of go through this very quickly. Snake plants is another one that people are like, oh yeah, my grandmother used to have a lot of those, especially the ones that grow in the rosette form. They're called snake plants commonly because people think that they, these long leaves can look like snakes. Another common name, which I don't like, is mother-in-law's tongue. They say that because supposedly a mother-in-law's tongue is sharp and mean. They say mean things, not my mother-in-law, but so mother-in-law tongue, snake plant, there's Sansevieria. Were more science. So for my whole life, snake plants were called Sansevieria. Apparently, for hundreds and hundreds of years, botanists have been arguing that Sansevieria are actually the same as Dracaena because they have similar flowers. Now, I'm not a scientist, but do you think that these look anything alike? I don't. You can tell how I feel about this. There was a name change in 2018. Scientists discovered that the DNA in this guy and this guy are the same. So guess what? Sansevieria are now called Dracaena. Who knew, right? So I'm going to call them Sansevieria because I'm old school, but these guys are related. They have similar flowering habits. They really don't flower a lot, so that shouldn't be important, but the DNA put them together. So I'm going to call these Sansevieria. You can call them Dracaena, but that's why your name says that it's actually a Dracaena. So let's talk about where these guys live. They live in Africa, but instead of living on the eastern shore where they live in those fog forests, they are going to live in hot, arid, dry, rocky areas with really well-draining soil. Don't get a lot of rain. So remember that for watering. They also are going to be in the understory being sheltered by larger plants. So direct sun is not a thing that they are used to. So taking that, people say they don't need light. They're another one of those no light plants. I already gave you my spiel on that. But the best varieties of snake plants or Sansevieria for lower light are going to be your all green ones, like this one, Zelenica. Or there's black coral, which is this one that I have over here. So they're going to be the darker form. Another one that actually does well in lower light I don't have is the Laurentii. It has the yellow around it. But when you get into some of the newer varieties that have a lot of silver and white in them, those are going to want to get more light. But for the most part, Sansevieria, they're fine in what I would say low light, as long as you water them properly. Again, when we say they're fine in low light, it doesn't mean they're going to thrive. It means that they can exist in low light. If you want it to grow and you want the colors to be more vivid, then give it some more light. Placement in the home, I think we went over that. Yeah, room with a window would be great. If it's a darker one, and it's an office fluorescent light, they'll do okay. You see them in restaurants, you see them in darker areas. But if you're going to get one like this guy here with all this yellow, these guys, they like to have more light. They're not really that cold sensitive. I mean, they are, but not like the African violets. So just keep them away from drafts. They'll pretty much go anywhere. I do want to touch really quick on, because we get people coming in saying, I want a snake plant because I want to clean the air in my house. We've been hanging out during COVID. I feel like everyone's breathing everyone's air. I need some Sansevieria. And Dracaena, their cousin. They're the top list. NASA did a study. What are they cleaning out? All plants are going to clean your air. Specifically, the ones that NASA says are air cleaning are going to take organic compounds like benzene and formaldehyde out of your air. So you don't really have a problem with that in your household. That's something sick building syndrome. Remember, all of the offices now have to use flame retardant chemicals on their drapes and on their fabrics. They're using, instead of wooden desks, they're using the plastic, particle. There's a lot of chemicals. In the room I'm in here, we have, this ceiling that you can push up. We have the carpet. Everything is flame retardant. There's a lot of chemicals. So in an office, it's great to have Dracaena and Sansevieria because they are going to filter out all of those impurities that can make people sick. That being said, you need to have about 10% the number of your square footage in plants. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house, you should have 20 medium sized, which would be about this size, 20 of these plants to make a measurable difference. If you have a 6,000 square foot big house, you need 60. Okay, so just having one is not going to make a big difference, but it's going to make you feel better. But I like to address that because people come in and think they're feeling sick, they want to buy a snake plant, it will make them better. It doesn't really work that way. So we covered that. Watering. These are the guys you're going to want to let dry down even more than the Philodendron and Pothos. And that's where we get into problem. You're going to want to keep them in smaller pots. You are going to want to use really well draining soil. I like all of the houseplant soils that we sell here. What I like to do for Sansevieria is I like to add either some pumice right here, basically lava rock or perlite. This is going to help the soil drain. This is a great product. It's only $4 for this little bag of pumice. So you can add this to your soil, about a third pumice or a third perlite, which comes in this bag. And 2/3 soil is what I would recommend for your Sansevieria, your snake plant. Perlite is great. It's a little less expensive. It does float to the top and make your plants look snowy over time. So you might want to try out the new small bags of pumice that we're selling. You want your Sansevieria to dry at least a third of the way down from the top. Stick your finger down in there. So this is one that I brought from home. I actually grew this from one leaf from this through propagating. So we'll talk real quick about propagating Sansevieria. They're the really fun plant to propagate. But I grew this from this. It's totally cool, right? So this soil is really dry. I can stick my finger all the way down there. It's dry and sandy, like the dunes in the beach. That's what you want to experience about a third of the way down, at least, maybe 50%. They can go a lot longer without water than people realize. The key is that when you do water them, you're going to want to do that same full watering that I talked about. You aren't going to give it, oh, Gretchen said that they don't like water, so I'm going to give them 4 ounces of water every Friday. I didn't say that, right? But people think I say that. So you're not going to measure the water. You're not going to water by calendar. Those are the two biggest obstacles. A lot of new plant owners want to, oh, it's Friday, I want to water all my plants. You can do that, but touch the soil. Okay, so you want to allow them a pothos, you're going to want to let dry down to about your knuckle. A Sansevieria snake plant, at least a third of the way or half of the way dry. Then you water it fully till it's coming out the bottom and you put it back. Problems with snake plants. The biggest problem I see is people putting them in pots that are too big. The same thing. They like really snug pots. You want to wait until the roots fill that pot up. If it's a plastic pot, you can see it bulging. They don't want big pots. It's going to give you a rotten, limp plant. So the biggest problem we see is people will come in and, you know, a whole section will just be yellow and limp. And it's because your watering is off. They do get spider mites and other problems, but not really. It's a really low pest plant, in my opinion. And then propagation, and then I'm done. Again, you can take one leaf like this. All you're going to do is make little segments about inch long. You want to make sure that when you cut a segment off, when you place it in either water or soil, the cut part is going down into the soil. It's easy here because this is a point at the top, right? But then when we get to this one and we cut it, believe it or not, if you by accident stick this on the counter and pick it up and put this part in the soil water, nothing's going to happen. So I always tell people, get a Sharpie marker and put a little dot at the bottom. And that's how you're always going to put it into either your soil or your water. I don't water propagate these. It's quicker, but you can get a lot of mushiness. So you would put this in a little pot, just like I did the African violet, stick it in there. You're going to get a little pup, a little plant will grow out. And literally, I cut a big leaf into about however many plants there are in here. These all grew out. So this took me about 6 months of my life, but it was about this small. And now I have this plant that I made from one leaf that fell off of a plant I was unwrapping at work. So if you're on a budget and you want to, grow a lot of snake plants, super easy way to do that. And I think I'm done. Questions on snake plants?
Fantastic. No questions on snake plants at the moment, but we have had a couple people write in to mention that they took their snake plants outside for the summer and they ended up with beautiful blooms, which I actually had no idea that they bloomed until you said so. So I'm gonna have to
yeah. So, and they can be fragrant. And as far as putting plants outside, let me touch on that. Yes, your tropical plants, they grow outside in nature. Just make sure that, again, I killed my mom's pothos when I was little. It was a golden pothos like this. I was getting into plants. True story, it was the middle of July in New Jersey. I see this in our dark living room doing fabulous. And I'm like, oh, it's so nice out. I'm going to literally put it in my backyard, 12 noon, July in New Jersey. We went to the pool. I came back. It had big black burn spots. Like someone took a magnifying glass and just burned it. I couldn't believe it. My mom didn't yell at me. She was just like, why would you do that? I thought it would be happy. So just remember, if you want to move them outside, that's great. But these guys got to go, they have to go in the shade. Same with the Sansevieria. You can see in Florida where my parents live, you can see Sansevieria growing right outside their door. They're going to be under trees. Sometimes they get hit with some light, but any of the house plants that you have indoors can safely go outdoors during the summer. You just have to make sure that you acclimate them and that you don't put something that wants to be in the shade of a bush or a tree out in the middle of your backyard. Even if it's like a big ficus, when I could bring my fiddle leaf fig outside, it's too big now. I would have to start it in shade and then over a week or two move it, and then it would be in full sun. So yeah, and they can bloom. They get blooms that look very much like the Dracaena blooms, and they can be very fragrant too. My moonshine, which this is a moonshine, my moonshine bloomed. And my dog ate the bloom off of it. They are toxic. My dog was fine, but it was fragrant for as long as it lasted. So if you get one to bloom, you're lucky.
That's neat. I had no idea. Okay, so you answered one question, which is, are they pet friendly? So the answer is no.
No.
The next question is from someone. Okay, let's see. Should you cut the snake plants before they get tall and start new ones, or?
Okay, so if this is one of my favorites, by the way. This is a new one. It's called Frozen or Frost. I always say it wrong. It is Frozen. It's hard to see. Look what's happening. Do you see there's a little pup coming up here? So they'll do that. They'll shoot up new growth. Eventually you can take this out and plant it in its own pot, but we want to wait until this is really full. So as far as how tall they will grow, some will grow taller than others. This one, some will stay small, especially the ones that grow in a rosette. This guy, yeah, they'll grow taller. There are certain ones, like I have a Sayuri, the leaves on that can get this long. Jaboa is another one, the leaves can get this long. For the most part, these guys will tap out at about, what is that? Maybe 24 inches. Like this one here is mature. Okay. So if you're talking about cutting, because there's a shelf, just remember, if you cut this, it will have a hard, scabby, it will never be a nice point like this. So if you want to make the pot less full, you could divide it. These are all individual little plants. You take it out, That's again something in my propagation seminar. Or, you know, if you have like a rogue leaf, sometimes like this, and it looks like crazy, this would be great to just cut off down by the base. And then you could make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 different little pieces that you would propagate to make a new plant. So I hope that answered the question. You can feel free to take off these big, long individual leaves, but if you're going to trim it height wise, you don't really do that because you're losing that nice tip. It's going to be a scabby edge.
I think
And if
that
you have
answers
any
the question.
questions on dividing them or repotting, you can come in and we can help you with that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think, Gretchen, we're about out of time. It's 1:05, so I want to make sure that we're able to wrap up so people can get back to work if they're taking a lunch break or something.
I got 4 plants in an hour. I don't know how I did it.
Yeah, we covered a lot of material. So before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody we will be sending out a survey this afternoon. For those of you who've been filling out these surveys, we've added some new questions as we're looking towards hopefully, I know vaccines are starting to go out. We're hoping at some point soonish, we'll be able to get back in store. So we're trying to find out how things are working for you online versus in store if you went to those classes. Basically looking to the future of how we can best serve you all.
Can I say one more thing, Sally? I'm sorry. So for anyone watching this, so we do, you know, wear the masks. The greenhouse is nice and open. Today would be a great time to come because it snowed. Nobody's in the greenhouse. And you can see all of these guys. We have them all in and it's very safe. You can just come in and take a look. We let people, you know, but this is a good time to visit because there's nobody down there.
Nobody's
Have
in.
a place to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Use your coupon, right? Aren't they getting a coupon?
Yes. Yeah. So you all will get a coupon. We have some incentives. You can win a gift card if you fill out the survey. So we really appreciate that. If you all can take the time, that's super helpful for us. You can give some feedback to Gretchen. That's helpful for her. So that's my pitch for that. So Gretchen, is there anything you want to close out with before we wrap up?
Just, you know, there's a lot of people getting into plants, and I know you get on Instagram, you get on Facebook, you see TikTok of all these exotic, super expensive, rare things. It's kind of like jumping into a graduate level college course. Like any of these plants that I've discussed today would be great plants to get started with. Even if you are involved in a lot of those other like fancy aeroids, like I said, the fancy philodendrons, something that blooms is like awesome and it's easy. So if you're a more foliage person, why don't you try one of the, you know, like I said, try something blooming. It looks really nice in the winter. And you feel rewarded and a sense of satisfaction if you buy something in bloom, and it will naturally go out of bloom. If you can bring it back to bloom again, you're like, I did this, you know, like how I made that plant. So these are really good options for you, whether you're into another type of plant already or whether it's your first plant.
Great, Gretchen, thank you so much. We just had we've had a lot of people asking about the recording. So quickly before we sign off, if you hit reply to the Zoom email, you can ask me for it. I'll send it to you. This video also, Gretchen's demonstrations usually go on our YouTube channel. So we do have a YouTube channel. Don't think most people know that, but you can just look us up there as well. But again, feel free to email me. So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody. Please feel free to follow up with us. We're all happy to answer questions. We're so happy to be here and be able to talk to you all, even though we can't be in person right now. So
come in and see us if you can, or
yes,
shoot us an email.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Gretchen. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Everybody have a good afternoon.